Hey, this is Rondé Barber, former Virginia Cavalier, now class of 2023 Pro Football Hall of Famer. You're listening to the Jerry Ratcliffe Show.
Welcome to the Jerry Ratcliffe Show. I'm Chris Graham, joined by the Hall of Famer Jerry Ratcliffe. We've got a lot to talk about. We're coming back from the ACC Football Kickoff in Charlotte. We got some football news, obviously, to talk about with so much from the kickoff. And we'll talk a little bit later some basketball recruiting news from UVA basketball. But Jerry, the news today as we're recording this on Tuesday, we're still getting news from the kickoff, even though we left Charlotte last week. The preseason poll out today, and I'm guessing that later this week, probably tomorrow, the preseason first and second and whatever other teams will be out. But we have the preseason poll today. Clemson first, Florida State second. Not surprising maybe there. And I guess also probably not surprising, Virginia picked 14th, dead last in the ACC coming into 2023. Sort of your assessment of that, and how did that match with how you voted?
Pretty close. I think I don't remember the exact order, but just looking at what I see from the results, I think mine was relatively close to how it came out. I think probably in some of the middle of the pack voting, I looked at schools that had to play Clemson and Florida State in the same season and automatically knocked them down a notch below people who didn't have to play those. So, but yeah, I think pretty close. So you had Clemson, I guess, runaway in first place votes with 103 to 67 over Florida State. But the Florida State was pretty much if they weren't voted number one, they were voted number two. And I think vice versa with Clemson. They were runaway favorites for the first two spots. And then North Carolina, NC State, Miami, and Duke. I think Duke probably got knocked down a little bit because they are one of the schools that have to play Florida State and Clemson. Then Pitt and Louisville. Wake Forest, who also has to play Florida State and Clemson, finished in ninth place. I think if they hadn't had such a tough schedule, and they might have to play Notre Dame too, I'm not sure, but they would have probably finished higher than number 10, Syracuse, number 11, Virginia Tech, number 12, Georgia Tech, number 13, Boston College, and number 14, Virginia. That's probably going to be a close race for those last five spots between those five schools. I don't think there's a whole lot that separates the five really, except Virginia's still up in the air on how they can score, and that's going to keep Virginia a big question mark in most people's minds, because if you can't score, you can't win.
Yeah, I think Virginia probably, it's fair to say, should go into the season as the favorite, if you can be a favorite to be last place. But I think the top four matches my thoughts. I think after the top four, I think those four are the teams that are the best. I mean, obviously Florida State, Clemson, Florida State are the clear top two. I think Carolina could play their way into that mix. I think State maybe could, with Robert Anae and Brennan Armstrong, two former Virginia guys there running the offense for that team this year. You know, they won 8 games last year with an offense that was actually less productive than Virginia's offense. So if they can win 8 games with that, they can certainly, if they can build upon that, they can do well there. I think the middle of the pack is the middle of the pack, and then I would agree with you. Those bottom five are they're the bottom five, and we'll who moves higher within that bottom five or lower as the season goes on. But I think those are the three kind of stratification levels for the ACC this year. And even within the first one, there's a clear top and bottom of those first four. I think storyline wise, Jerry, I mean, the ACC, which has not had a team in the playoff the last couple of years, needs a team into playoff. This is the last year of the 14 playoff. We'll go to 12 next year. With the new scheduling model and the going back to a 14 team conference instead of 2 7-team divisions, and the championship game is 1 versus 2. will help in that respect. If Florida State and Clemson, or Clemson and Florida State finish 1 and 2, they will get to play in the championship game, whereas in past years they would not have been able to do that. But the ACC desperately needs to have somebody in that playoff, and I think we need Drake May to be a Heisman Trophy candidate, if not win the thing, for the ACC to get some cachet that we have not had the last few years.
Yeah, and he could be. Obviously, he's highly regarded around the country because some schools tried to lure him away with $5 million NIL packages because they felt like he was that good and could probably help their team at least make the playoffs, if not get into the championship. And he's legit. I mean, we saw what he could do last year he was surrounded by a pretty good cast. His offensive coordinator, Phil Longo, is gone now. I think he went to Wisconsin, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, it'll be interesting to see how he coordinates with the new OC down there. And I think he lost a couple of his favorite targets. It'll be interesting to see how they do. And in Carolina, the thing that's been holding them back has been their defense, really. And it's supposed to be a little bit improved this season. But I agree. I think it's Clemson and Florida State. They'll be playing in the ACC championship game in Charlotte. I guess the big question mark for Clemson is if their new quarterback, who played in the bowl game last year, when they sat their regular season guy and went with the true freshman in that game, how he develops. And I think I think they have a new offensive coordinator too, I believe. I think the guy that replaced Tony Elliott as OC is gone after that one season last year, and they have a new guy in there whose name escapes me at the moment. But yeah, it looks like mostly a two-horse race, unless Drake May just has a phenomenal Heisman-like year to where he can get the Tar Heels in the winner's circle over some teams that they might normally not beat. So I can't see anybody below that unless Armstrong, like you said, if he and Anai can have the kind of year that they had at Virginia a few years ago and pull the rest of the team along with them, who knows, but that's yet to be determined.
Yeah, I think that was a big coup for NC State, for Dave Doeren, not only to hire Robert Anai, but then it just, I wonder if it was really a package deal, and we may find that out a few years from now, to bring Armstrong in with him. But for Anai to be able to go to a guy that has 4 years of experience running his system, and they've got a couple of young quarterbacks there too that can learn and don't have to come right in and play the air raid, and that can learn at the feet of Anai and also Brennan Armstrong how to see how that offense is run. But in the meantime, Armstrong can go back out there. He's got motivation certainly to try to show that last season for him was an aberration, not the previous years that under Anai at Virginia were the aberrations. And like I said, when I did a piece on Brennan, and because he was at the kickoff, which was kind of weird to see, he was at the kickoff wearing red and white, not orange and blue like he was last year. But did a piece on him and looking at their offense. Virginia was ranked 10th in offense last year in the ACC, which for Virginia fans, we remember how anemic that felt compared to the year before when Virginia was 3rd in the country in total offense. NC State was ranked 11th last year in total offense in the ACC. So, and they still went 8-5 and even, people could attribute that to Devin Leary being out for 6 games, but his numbers were even down when he was playing before he got hurt. He tore a pec muscle, had to have surgery, and missed the last 6 games of the season. Their offense struggled even when he was healthy. So there were obvious issues there at State. I think State's improved with bringing Anai in and of course, getting 1 year of Brennan Armstrong. So, yeah, I think they and Carolina both could, if things go the right way, they could play their way into that ACC championship game. But I think after those four, Miami, Jerry, I'll say this, it's kind of funny to me. Because there's no division set up anymore in the ACC, we didn't get to vote for Miami to be number one in the Coastal like we see, like the media likes to do every year. This is the first time we didn't get to do that. They get picked fifth this year. So we broke our Miami streak as a media group.
Yeah, that was interesting. For a while it was Carolina, and then it was Miami winning the preseason Coastal poll. But I don't know. I kind of miss the divisions. I thought having divisions was pretty cool. I'm not sure the divisions were set up to get the most out of them, but originally. But I think divisional play is going to hurt schools like Virginia in the long run, because I mean, in a better situation, Virginia could compete for the Coastal Division crown. I don't know if they can compete for the overall ACC crown or not, but the way things are set up now, because you used to have to beat 6 teams, now you got to beat 12 teams to be in those top 2. That's awfully hard to do, particularly when your program is down like Virginia's is right now. So I mean, right now they couldn't even compete for the Coastal title if it were divisional play. But I think that's going to hurt Virginia in the long run. And some of the other schools that are normally in the bottom of the pack.
You saying that Virginia couldn't compete for, even the Coastal right now. How about that comment from Brent Pry on his when he was on the big stage there at the kickoff, where he was asked about the quality of play in Virginia, and he just outright asserted that Virginia Tech is the flagship school in the state of Virginia. I know Tony Elliott was asked about that in the breakout. I loved his reply. He's got to say that pretty much, right? But Tech was 3-8 last year. Virginia was 3-7 last year. Tech's had 3 straight losing seasons. I don't know if we can even declare a flagship school in Virginia right now. And if we did, I don't think we'd be declaring either Virginia Tech that flagship right now.
You're probably right about that, because JMU was pretty darn good last year. So was William and Mary.
Liberty at the Division I at the FBS levels had some success recently. So
yeah, I was standing beside Tony Elliott when the TV guy came up. I don't know where he was from, and just kind of threw that in Tony's face. Brent Pye just said that they were the flagship program in the ACC. Stuck a microphone in his face. How do you respond to that? I don't know. That's the kind of stuff that I don't like about mass media events. But what was Tony supposed to say? He said, I thought Tony's answer was good. He said, well, that's what Pry is supposed to say. And if you ask me that, that's what I'm supposed to say. So you're right. At this point, it would be hard for either one of them to make a case that they're the flagship program in the state of Virginia because of recent results. And it's up in the air again this year, I would think, because I don't know if Tech plays any other in-state school other than Virginia. I know Virginia plays William and Mary and JMU, 2 of the better other programs in the state right now.
Tech opens with ODU, who's won 2 of the last 3 with Tech.
Yeah, but I'm not sure ODU is in position to do that again. But
they shouldn't have been last year either. But the game is in Blacksburg this year, so
yeah, that's true.
Tech did defend home turf for that 1 win in the last 3 against ODU. But man, yeah, and Virginia, of course, has JMU week 2. Liberty Tech beat Liberty last year. That was kind of an upset, to say the least, because Liberty actually had a 7-1 start. They, including wins over Arkansas and BYU. They blew out BYU in Lynchburg. They got BYU to come to Lynchburg, and they just kicked the crap out of them. But then struggled down the stretch as Hugh Freeze was looking for his next job, which he got at Auburn. Then they stole away Jamie Chadwell from Coastal Carolina. They spend more money on their coach at Liberty than Virginia Tech spends on their coaches. They got that Baptist money going for them. I'm just, Liberty might be our flagship school, but Virginia Tech got some work to do, no doubt about that.
Yeah, Liberty seems to has an unlimited money pool, that's for sure. And every time I drive by there on my way south to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, it seems like you see a new building going up off the side of the road. So, who knows? They could end up being that way if they can get some momentum going. And I think it did hurt them losing Hugh Freeze, but he was only going to be there so long. And this new guy, he did a great job at Coastal. Perhaps he can continue that momentum at Liberty.
So we've talked about what we learned in Charlotte. There was also a media event in Charlottesville after the kickoff. You were there on Friday. That was a meeting with, Mike Collins was the player who was there, but then coaches, assistant coaches, position coaches, etc. Also got a chance to tour, get a view of at least the new building that's going up. So what did you learn in Charlottesville last Friday?
Well, I had focused mostly on offense when we were down in Charlotte. So when we came back for Friday's event, I focused on defense. I'm still doing a little research and getting ready to write that. But I talked to John Rudzinski, the defensive coordinator, for a lengthy period of time, and he's very enthusiastic, very excited about this year's defense, and he should be, because they have 8 starters returning, plus some other guys that have had some starting experience either here or elsewhere, like Malcolm Green, the defensive back from Clemson who transferred up. He's had injury problems a lot down at Clemson that prevented him from really being all he could be. I asked him a couple of weeks ago where he thought he'd be if he hadn't had all those injuries at Clemson. He said, I think right now I'd be in the NFL or in a training camp, and he probably would have been. So, I think Coach Rudd is very fired up about the possibilities of this year's defense, and the fact that he has so many guys returning with experience, I think allows him to perhaps maybe teach a little less and just concentrate on schemes and some other things. And I imagine they could do a little bit more and be a little more aggressive if they want to be this year. And I talked to Chris Slade, the defensive end outside linebackers coach, some, and Chris, his goal is to produce more sacks with his unit this year. I think they had 12 from his group last season, and he's expecting 25 to 30 this year. So he's going to be barking in their ear every day about getting to the quarterback. And if they're successful in doing that, that could help the offense, because it could create some turnovers and maybe give the offense some short fields and help them get on the scoreboard, whereas that didn't happen much last year. But a few years ago, in 2019, when Virginia was so great defensively and very aggressive in terms of pressuring the quarterback and creating turnovers, we saw what that did for the offense, and it helped them win some games. And so, perhaps that could be a secret weapon for Virginia this year, is to create havoc, which they did in 2019, and put the offense in better situations.
What about that new building, the $80 million football ops center that I guess is, last I heard, now you'll have the latest on this, but last I heard was on track to open up next year, 2024. How are things going there?
Yeah, it's supposed to open next spring. It looks like things are going very smoothly. I guess somewhat of a mild winter and spring helped in terms of advancing the construction. We have a video of that and the whole complex from the McHugh Center all the way panning left to right to the 2 new buildings. The Olympic Sports Building is going up right beside of the football building. The football building is a little bit ahead, obviously. And those buildings are in between the McHugh Center and the George Welsh Indoor Football Facility. And just outside of that are the grass practice fields where U-Haul used to be. And so you can get a good look at that if you'll observe the video in the story on my website. But it looks like it's coming up quickly and appears to be on schedule. I don't know. I have a specific rundown on that part of it, but I know that they had some prospective recruits up, I think yesterday, Chris, and they were going to show the building off to them. That's something that they're definitely going out of their way to do. Before, all they could do is show pictures and drawings, renderings and stuff, but now they actually have they can show the kids the building that's going up, and it'll be ready before this time next year. And so the new class, this new incoming class that they're recruiting now, will be the first class to enjoy that building, along with the guys who are returning to the program. But it's a much needed facility, as we know. George Welsh, before he passed, talked to me about how badly they needed a new building to replace McHugh. And of course, Mike London harped about that, as did Bronco Mendenhall, who contributed heavily to that building. If I recall, I think he gave him $500,000. What?
I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose he left that in the pot when he left, but Virginia, they was supposedly last in the ACC in that type of facility. I don't know. I haven't, back on the old ACC football tour, we used to get to see all these facilities, something that you don't necessarily see as a fan or a media person on game days. When you go in for games, you don't get to tour the facilities like we did on the old ACC football tour, and schools went out of their way to show that to us, to show their progress. And I remember one year in specific, it was in the mid to late 90s. I had been on the football tour and wrote extensively about North Carolina's new facility, how they had upgraded things, and it struck the late Carl Smith, who was one of Virginia's former Virginia football player and a very successful businessman here in town. And he decided, we've got to do something about this. And that's when he, at that time, made the largest contribution to a athletic facility in college football in the United States, and paid for the renovation and expansion of Scott Stadium and Bryant Hall. If people remember what they had before that, it was pitiful, really. They were dressing in Quonset huts in the in what is now the end zone where Bryant Hall is, in a parking lot down there. And there was no Bryant Hall there. It was a one-deck stadium. It was just not a very appealing place. And you talk about Virginia showing off this new facility. Back in those days, they would try not to even take recruits by the football stadium if they could avoid it. They would take them over to U-Haul, which at that time was still in pretty good shape. But getting off track a little bit there. But now they can show off this building to those recruits, and I know they mention that on every recruiting visit, and they're trying to use that to help lure to get visits from some of the better players in the state of Virginia, which they haven't been very successful at that in recent years, Chris.
Well, I remember when we talked with Jerry Capone a couple of years ago, I guess it was, Jerry, of course, a former coach on Georgia's staff. And he was remembering the days of trailer park, as they called it, where the coaches' offices for the football program were in trailers outside of U-Haul. And then when McHugh Center came online in the late 80s, it was at that point for a year or two, it was state of the art. But that's almost 40 years ago now. And how things really improved then for recruiting, and for attracting recruits. You got to think that this new facility could have, if you use it right, it should have the same kind of impact that McHugh had when it came online, back almost 40 years ago now.
Yeah, you would think so and hope so, because everything that a football player needs is right there in one building, and it's right there beside the football offices and beside the indoor facility and beside the practice fields, which is pretty darn nice, and everything will be updated and upgraded, state of the art. And it's something that Virginia had lagged behind on. I haven't been to all the places in the ACC and know what they can compare it to, but I did get a personal tour of the Oregon facility, which was the rave of the nation college football world a few years ago when Virginia played out at Oregon, and I got a nice tour from one of their assistant ADs who was responsible for putting that building together, and I was just simply blown away by what I saw there. It was left nothing to the imagination for. I can imagine what a football recruit must have thought when he walked into that building compared to some of the other places that were probably recruiting him. I mean, it had everything you could imagine that a football player would ever want. And we've heard stories about Clemson's facility down there with the slide and putt and barbershops and all kinds of other stuff. So I don't think Virginia's going to be having those features, but it will have everything that a player really needs. And that's all you need as a football player. Just, what's functional and what you need. You can eat there. You can bond there with your teammates. They'll have rest areas and game rooms. I assume that they can play video games and stuff and hang out. Not to mention all the weightlifting and sports medicine and nutritional stuff, places to study. I'm sure it'll have everything that a football player would need.